Welcome into Fantasy Pros on the fantasy football side. I'm Chris Welsh, and today, who are some busts that we've got to avoid? Well, we've got Derek Brown here to tell us how and who to avoid. Now, of course, these guys might not be players that we like completely moving away from on an undrafted list, but it's more about we really don't like the value, and obviously the production based on the value is going to bust. So how and who to avoid in the bust market? Dbro's got you covered. And Dbro, let's just jump right into it. Dbro's bust number one for the season is who?
Man, I know he just got paid and people are going to hate this. This is Kyren Williams. He's RB 12, 26th overall in the ECR. And I can't rank Kyren Williams that high. I can't draft Kyren Williams that high. And I know he was the RB 10 last year, Welshy. I get it. And I know he was their guy. He was top 2 in snap share, opportunity share, red zone touches for the Rams last year. I get that he's a paid player now, and congrats for Kyren on getting the fat check. But the efficiency wasn't there last year, Welsh. I think Jarquez Hunter is going to factor into this backfield. And if Kyren Williams doesn't return with those top 5 usage numbers in this offense, he doesn't have the efficiency and he doesn't have the pass game utility to bail him out. The Rams have not been thrown to the running backs. The Kyren Williams as a receiving, that narrative died with him as a prospect in college. It hasn't happened in the NFL. They've been bottom 5 in target share to the running back position. And I don't see that changing in the year 2025. So if Kyren Williams is this volume dependent back that we're like, oh, he's getting everything, that's really what fuels his upside. If he's not that guy, if the 95% snap shares drop to 70%, 65%. Then Kyren Williams is an RB2, a volume field RB2 for a player that last year ranked outside the top 35 running backs, Welsh, per fantasy points data, in explosive run rate, missed tackles forced per attempt, and yards after contact per attempt. This is not a player that I want to spend an RB1 or at least pay an RB1 price tag for in fantasy for 2025. I can't do it.
Well, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, as we were told. And that, it wasn't planned this way, but I'm kind of on the opposite side of a lot of these busts. Specifically, this one is tough. I actually wanted to bust Kyren Williams coming into this season, but all the same things you just talked about with Hunter are the same things we said last year about Corum and the year before.
I didn't say those things.
I'm saying the narrative, the public narrative of Kyren Williams every season is that they will stop using him. They will use this other great back that's there, and they don't. From weeks 10 on, he didn't play in week 18. From weeks 10 through 17, he was the 10th scoring running back in half PPR. Double-digit points scored every single week from week 12 on. Week 10 on, he was inside the top 10. We haven't seen the McVay offense that has decided to use some committee approach, and they just paid Kyren Williams. I get where you're going because it doesn't feel great, especially in a pass receiving RB world where you just saw Devon Achane go, and you see Jahmyr Gibbs, and you even look at like Bucky Irving, who's a pounder, but he can catch the ball in the backfield. And then you look at Kyren Williams and you go, oh, I don't know if I can do it. But he does do it in that offense. He does it year after year. Again, the entire second half of the season, he's a top 10 running back. They just paid him. And it seems like played over narratives. This is a tough one. I think I'm a little bit closer at cost than outside of a bust here, I get where you're going with it.
I get it. This feels like all the reasons that everybody wanted to draft Rachaad White outside of the contract. This feels like all the reasons that everybody wanted to draft Rachaad White. And Rachaad White was the guy until enter super talented rookie explosive running back Bucky Irving last year. And I think that that's what's going to happen to Kyren Williams. Jarquez Hunter is going to factor into this backfield, and Kyren can still be the lead guy. But an RB1 price tag, can't do it.
Bust number 2 is another running back. And I can tell you, as a little tease here in just a tiny bit, Dbro's got his biggest bust of the 2025 season coming up, and that is saved for the end. But we've got one more running back that we're going to hit here, and this is another one. I mean, I feel like you're picking on another guy that I like, and I'm actually going to just jump in here before you bust him out, and it's Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard is going to be one of your biggest busts. As far as ADP goes, he's a top 20 RB in there. Rico Dowdle was outed, which I think, or was brought in, which I think potentially has some people concerned. I would say before you start to bust him, I want to hear where your narrative goes with it, because Chuba from weeks 10 through 16, he didn't play in 17 and 18, so I'm not going to add that. So I'm obviously making a little bit of case for myself here, but in half PPR, he was the 11th scoring running back. He was a top 12 running back in fantasy, essentially through the second half of the season that he played. We also saw some big volume. We saw the offense pick itself back up. Is Rico Dowdle coming into town enough to not make him at least even like a solid floor RB? I think based on what we know what his upside is, which we saw last year, it being a top 12 running back, to where he's being drafted, I kind of see him as a value. But what say you, and why is he a bust for you?
So I think we cannot be expecting last year to repeat. And I think this is a perfect scenario for Chuba Hubbard. Last year was a perfect run out. If you look at what happened for Chuba Hubbard, so Miles Sanders left week 10 and he was out weeks 10 through 17. If you look at the beginning usage for Chuba Hubbard of the season, I think that's closer to what this team wants for Chuba Hubbard or what they want for this backfield. So weeks 1 through 3, before I think Carolina figured out, okay, Miles Sanders really didn't have the juice anymore. Okay, Rico Dowdle, Trevor Etienne do have the juice. Before they realized that Sanders just didn't have it anymore, you had Chuba Hubbard playing 54 to 58% of the snaps. The red zone rushing opportunities, Hubbard had 3 and Miles Sanders had 2. And I understand this is a really small sample size, but even if you look at, okay, the first 9 weeks of the season with Miles Sanders there, Chuba Hubbard wasn't playing this bell cow role. He only ran a route on 48.6% of dropbacks. He had a 9.7% target share, and receiving has not been his calling card. So again, a player, we are putting everything on Hubbard. He needs to own the backfield and the early downs. And after a season where they asked Chuba Hubbard and he answered it and go out and be the bell cow, he's a substandard receiving back. They go out and they add Rico Dowdle, who is coming off a surprising 1,000-yard season of his own. Trevor Etienne is as good, if not a better receiving back than both of those guys. So you look at the small sample before they realized Sanders just was cooked. This was a split backfield. After Sanders was out is really where we saw Hubbard truly take off, because before that, he wasn't getting a ton of routes. At least, he wasn't running 50% of routes on dropbacks. His pass game utility wasn't great. He wasn't good as a receiver for the entirety of the year. So Hubbard, I think this was a perfect storm scenario for him last year. And after that type of season, what did Carolina do? The clearest picture we have to look at what teams think about players and how they want to build the roster is through the draft and through free agency. And in both of those outlets, Carolina said, we need more running backs. And yes, a lot of people say that for Jonathan Brooks and say, well, yeah, that's because he's not going to play. We also need to understand this could be an indictment upon who Chuba Hubbard is as a player and what his role could be in 2025. With Rico Dowdle eating into the early down roles, maybe the red zone, and Trevor Etienne eating into the pass game utility. And if all that comes to fruition, Hubbard maybe is just a low-end RB2 or a high-end RB3 if this backfield doesn't just get shifted up or split up into 2 different pieces, but maybe 3.
If you believe Etienne is going to take a bite out of this, I suppose I could see where you're going with it. The positive is he's already being drafted as kind of a low RB2. And just a couple things to just add in here, just in my argument of him, that weeks 1 through 9 of if I know, I guess you were saying more of weeks 1 through 3, but weeks 1 through 9, because I gave you my side of 10 through 16. Guess what? Weeks 1 through 9, he was a better running back. He was a 7th scoring running back in half PPR during that time. And on the receiving side, he had 4 catches or more in 5 of the first 6 weeks, and he had 4 catches in 3 straight games to end out the year. So they're getting the ball in his hands in multiple spots. They did bring in some others, and that leads us to, I think, an interesting discussion, how to bust-proof your teams, because we are solely talking on how to avoid busts in this. You gave us 2 players that you think are a bust. You actually said the first scenario here, Dbro is going to give 3 tips to bust-proof your team, and I'm going to just set you up into the first one because I just want you to rattle all 3 off, Dbro. You said don't expect last year's stats to repeat or results to repeat when you were talking about Chuba Hubbard, and that is your number 1 in the first of the top 3 on how to bust-proof your team.
Yeah, and this comes down to we see so many people, whether this is the RB1 overall in ranks, the wide receiver 1, or how you want to look at all this, that people expect, and they could say that they don't, but the rankings and the narratives and the consensus, the generalized consensus out there says otherwise, where people are expecting last year's results to repeat to a certain extent. You're going to find plus EV and better EV, and you're going to avoid some of these busts if you already understand that, yes, we say this every year, Welsh. We get to week 7 and we say, wow, things are so wildly different than what we thought coming into the year. But that's not how we approach drafts. That's not how a lot of people approach rankings. They say, oh, well, I've seen that happen. That's what's going to happen in the next season, except it doesn't. So I'm not telling people to do that at every juncture of their draft. But the points of the draft where you're expecting, okay, well, the RB1 overall last year probably isn't going to be the RB1 overall of this year, or the wide receiver 1 overall, or some of these players that were stretch run heroes that don't reprise those roles in the next season. So do not expect last year's results to repeat. Also, you should not be following blindly whatever site you're drafting on. You don't need to be following these rankings and ADP sets blindly. You need to lean into content creators that you trust, your own process, and the homework that you're doing, whether that's on FantasyPros, using the draft wizard, using cheat sheets, following sharp people and they're creating content and stuff, or your own process. You need to follow that over following these blind rankings and ADP sets that are on these sites, which are just a collection of the aggregate. And that's following me in my 3rd tip here. Follow your own process, follow people you trust, and fade the echo chamber. So many people get in so much trouble with saying, yeah, but that email right after the draft's going to come out and I'm going to get laughed out of the room. I'm going to get a D+, and it's not going to be good. And follow your own process and follow voices and content creators you trust. Don't follow all this stuff blindly.
And if you're looking for the biggest bust, not just in Dbros, but the rest, if you're looking for the biggest targets, you're looking for the best strategy, you're looking for all the ranks to put into your process, not just blindly following, we've got so much for you to help create and better your process with the Fantasy Pros Draft Kit. Go and check it out today, fantasypros.com/kit. You can check out our premium content on there as well for free by claiming your 3-day trial of Fantasy Pros Premium at fantasypros.com/premium. And heck, if you guys want, you could save that free trial right up until your draft day. If you've only got one draft, you can use it. Check out the premium articles, the premium content, but don't be afraid to go over there, fantasypros.com/kit, because there's lots of great stuff in there. Go and check it out today. This leads us to the final in the bust tips. Dbro's ultimate bust of 2025, and I hate it. I hate it. So say it. Get out of here with this bust.
Xavier Worthy, man. It's got to be Xavier Worthy. He is going as a top 24 wide receiver in a lot of different spots. Right now in ECR, wide receiver 26 or ADP, wide receiver 26. I can't draft him at that spot. I know Rashee Rice is going to miss a little bit of time to suspension, and that's still up in the air. But Worthy, I think he's going to, as long as Rice is on the field, whenever he's out there, I think he's going to reprise the same role that he had last year, and that's as a field stretcher in this offense. Because the only time we saw him really hit the ground running is back into the season when he was in the Rashee Rice role. Weeks 1 through 12, this dude was the wide receiver 51 in fantasy points per game. He only drew a 13.9% target share. He had a 12.1 ADOT, and his design target rate was at 13.2%. He wasn't getting open, Welsh, amongst 124 qualifying wide receivers in that stretch. So that's 12 weeks of the season, dude. 12 weeks. 124 wide receivers. He was 96th in separation and 111th in route win rate per fantasy points data. Those numbers are terrible, dude. And it's not until they put him in that high-end design target role that he really kind of caught fire towards the end of the year, and that's the Rashee Rice role. So when Rice is back, Worthy is not playing this role. Worthy can play the Rice role. Rice cannot play the Worthy role, and Worthy is going to be used to stretch the field. So in weeks 13 through 17, yeah, sure, he was the wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. His ADOT dropped to 6.3 and his design target rate went up to 25.6. I can't draft a guy where I'm like, okay, if he's in that role, but Rice is coming back, well, he's going to be good in that role. Okay, but when Rice comes back, he's back into what? Field stretching role? And Mahomes has been quietly one of the worst deep ball passers in the NFL over the last 2 years. I just can't pay that type of price. If you were to tell me Xavier Worthy was going as a mid wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 3 and stuff, sure, I'm willing to dive in on that. But too many people are drafting him as a top 24 wide receiver right now or a top 30 wide receiver. And because of the archetype of wide receiver he is, because he hasn't been getting open, and because of, even if you look at the size of Worthy, unless they're feeding him gadget touches, what is he a guy you're going to expect to spike 10 to 12 touchdowns and that save his fantasy season? Probably not. He's a guy that's going to max out in that 6 to 7 or 8 range, even in the best of circumstances, because he doesn't have the size to be a red zone guy. So no, I cannot draft Xavier Worthy where he's going, because Rashee Rice is the number one, the clear number one in this offense, and it's not Worthy.
But when will he be there? Based on the Jordan Addison suspension, I do not hold out hopes that Rashee Rice is going to get a nice little small suspension, but we'll have to see. That could play a big role in it. Xavier Worthy, Dbro's biggest bust. What do you guys think? Do you think that's the biggest bust of the season? Drop a comment below and drop your biggest bust. Plus, if you got any great tips for people, how to avoid busts on your team. There's guys that are going to ruin it. Again, not saying that they are players that you're completely avoiding, but based on value and the players that you're passing on, real high opportunity to ruin your team. You guys drop comments below on what you think. For Dbro, I'm Chris Welsh. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Good luck avoiding all of those busts in your drafts this coming season. We'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros.